A lot has happened to the X-Men, in general, but particularly over the past decade or so. A lot of mutants have had their crack at being a part of the mutant race's premier superhero team, and we're gonna talk about them. Now, the mutant armor isn't a new X-Men member in the regular 616 universe, but recently, as in this year, 2024, the year of our Lord, thanks to the newly formed Marvel Ultimate Universe and Peach Momoko, we are getting a new interesting take on her character. Ultimate X-Men #1 stars Hisako Ichiki, aka Armor, as she first uncovers her mutant abilities. Now, first of all, Peach Momoko sets this story in Japan, and the whole thing is just this mix of cute but also very heavy and super cool. What's interesting about this take on Armor, and possibly the other mutants going forward for the Ultimate Universe, is how their abilities appear to be a bit more magically oriented. In the story, her powers appear to be almost supplied by a strange amulet she's given by a friend who then lost his life. Now, that's just me speculating. After a shadowy presence who people are guessing may be the Shadow King appears to Hisako, she is riding her bike away from where they met, and her power activates as a car nearly hits her, and her enormous armor stops it dead in its tracks. Definitely give that first issue a read if you get a chance, cause I glossed over a lot. Next up, Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not-so-great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, which is a silly name, where she would do battle with the X-Men. Now, gifted with skin that is extremely strong and resistant to attacks, Frenzy became an X-Men member in 2011 in X-Men Legacy number 250. Her steel-hard skin is so strong that it has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She is also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high-impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Now, speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons, and she can punch Jennifer Walters back if she really wants to. Frenzy has gone toe-to-toe with Rogue, arguably one of the most powerful X-Men, and she was classified as a level 6 threat by Cable, who helped hone her exceptional skills as a hand-to-hand combatant. Now, going back, if you need more incentive to read that new Ultimate X-Men, then I shall give you some. At the end of the very first issue, the cover of the second issue, which I haven't actually been able to read yet, features a completely new character who goes by the hero name Maystorm. Now, Maystorm is confirmed to have weather abilities and is clearly inspired by the revolutionary Storm from Ultimate Black Panther. Inspired by, but this is a wholly new character with their own unique design, and it seems the character will be joining both Armor and a few other characters that I'm going to talk about in a minute as the first new Ultimate X-Men team. Momoko created this character for last year's New Champions variant cover, but Maystorm will finally debut in Ultimate X-Men #2 of this year. Similar to Frenzy, Quentin Quire used to be a sort of villain back in the New X-Men. He spent his earlier years being an absolutely despicable kid who I always kind of wanted to just like kick in the shins. He was trying to be an anarchist leader of mutants and ended up doing more harm than good. After the schism of the X-Men, Wolverine took him to the school that he opened up. In a relatively short amount of time, Quentin became a more well-rounded character, and now he is someone I think is actually kind of cool. He still stayed a bit of a rebel and a narcissistic jerk, which you would think would make people hate him, but when he stops trying to cause anarchy, these traits end up becoming a fun aspect of his personality. Now, on Krakoa, he's back to annoying Wolverine and being pretty insufferable, but it's to a point where you kind of love him for it, maybe just a little bit. What's a little bit less fun is that recently, Quentin got his head lopped off and placed in an Orcus container designed to make use of mutant body parts by Sabretooth. Now, he recently called in the Exiles for help using his powers, so we shall see where that goes. Okay, I hope y'all don't mind, but I've got another of the new Ultimate X-Men that I'm going to talk about, and their name is Nico Minoru. Now, this is where things get really interesting and leads me to believe even more that these new X-Men will find some of their origins being influenced by magic and mysticism. Nico is a Japanese magical hero who uses the powerful Staff of One, and it's very interesting because on Earth 616, Minoru is not a mutant at all. In normal canon, she is a descendant of a magical family who are part of a cult. Nico steals her parents' staff after finding out that they are part of this cult, and she uses it alongside the team of teenagers known as the Runaways. Now, with full transparency, it is unclear yet if Momoko will be retconning Nico into being a a mutant, or if the blending of magic and mutation in Ultimate X-Men will see her magical bloodline coming into play, but she does appear to be a part of this new team of X-Men that is forming, which is something I am excited to see play out. Next up, Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she had diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, including her intuition and her genius level intellect. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and has even displayed some telekinesis. M, or Penance, became a part of the X-Men in 2013 in X-Men Volume 4, number 7. Okay nerds, I have one more Ultimate X-Men to talk about, and then I promise we will keep talking about actual 616 heroes. Peach Pomoko's design sheets have also included two new mutants, Mori and Natsu, whose origins have not really been revealed at all, and we don't know much more than their names and their designs. However, the internet has still learned some things from that alone. The two biggest things of note about the information we have is that one of the names, Natsu, means summer in Japanese, and one of these new mutants has one blindfolded eye and one red eye, which is under some kind of visor device thing. Now Summer, as you might know, is a big name in the X-Men world, and with the red eye and all that jazz, fans believe that the character of Natsu could be a version of Cyclops or Scott Summers, or maybe a character at least inspired by Cyclops, although the design is different enough that the character will definitely stand as their own person. To be honest, that whole one eye thing is also kind of giving me Cable vibes, but I have no idea how that would even work, so for now, we're sticking with possibly Cyclops. Maybe. Now although he first appeared in 2007 and was briefly on the X-Men in 2009, as a 2018 recruit to the X-Men and X-Men Red number 4, Gentle is someone I kinda just love talking about, so I'm including him on the list. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle against a Sentinel and his strength is said to rival Colossus's, with his resting strength increased every time he uses his powers. Gentle is a very strong and powerful mutant, but the catch is that he only uses his powers in emergencies. Because of his poor treatment he suffered as a child, Gentle suffers great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos in Wakanda to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive. On top of that, Gentle has pacifist beliefs, but his calm, peaceful demeanor should not fool anyone because Gentle has used his abilities to halt the one Sentinel from destroying the Xavier Institute, and he's such a cool character. A listed X-Men member since 2017, Ink sets himself apart from anyone else on this list by having the unique distinction of being a normal human being who received his powers through being tattooed by a mutant. Basically, the mutant who was the giver of his tattoos imbued those tattoos with powers, but the coolest thing about these powers is that they change into whatever tattoo he chooses to use. That's probably the worst way to explain it, so let me give some examples. Ink can make others who touch him extremely sick using a biohazard symbol tattoo that he received on his hand. He used this one on some cops who tried to arrest him in a tattoo shop when he first showed up. He gained superhuman strength from a tattoo that mimics Colossus's osmium metal skin. 2 lightning bolt symbols on his temples give him low-level telepathy. He's got a tattoo of wings for flight, an explosion that lets him explode stuff, and a caduceus symbol that lets him heal others, among other tattoos. But the real show of how powerful he can be came when he got the Phoenix symbol as a tattoo that actually gave him Phoenix powers, which is nuts. His Phoenix Force symbol tattoo allowed him to defeat the Y-Men, and he keeps all these tattoos able to use whichever one he needs in the moment. It's awesome. But last on our list today is Old Man Logan. Now, most of you know this Logan from the amazing Old Man Logan story and reality, where basically everything is ruined. The villains rule over everything with an iron fist in this wasteland. That is a whole story that we have talked about tons of times, but after the events of Secret Wars in 2015, crotchety old Logan made his way to the Prime 616 universe when main Wolverine had bit the dust, temporarily of course. Old Man Logan stepped stepped in and sort of not really took over his place. Now this Logan didn't have the same berserker rage, and he was much wiser. The main difference was he didn't fly off the handle as often. He didn't go off on his own and do things that may have put his team in danger, and his biggest accomplishment may have been wiping out both the evil Hulk from his own world and another evil Hulk, Maestro, in Earth Prime. Unfortunately, Old Man Logan finally went to the afterlife in 2019, back in his home reality. Are you bored of the same old X-Men? Well, here are 10 pretty new ones. Now when I say the name Pyro, most X-Men fans will think of St. John Alderdice, who has been around since the 80s, but that's not who I'm talking about today. Simon Lasker is the newest version of Pyro, debuting in 2017. When Lasker first manifested his mutant powers, Mesmero appeared to him in the form of Charles Xavier and brainwashed him into taking the name Pyro and joining a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And this group of mutants were defeated by the X-Men, and the brainwashing was broken. From there, he went on to join the X-Men Blue Team. Lasker's powers were very similar to the original Pyro, with the only difference being that he could generate his own flame, not needing an existing flame for him to control. Unfortunately though, the character went to the pearly gates in 2020, not to be seen since. Meanwhile, the original Pyro went on to join the Krakoan Marauders. Debuting in Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2 Number 1 in March of 2014, Lynn Lee, aka Nature Girl, started off at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. When Kitty Pryde relocated the X-Men to Central Park and the school was renamed to the Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, Lynn Lee decided to join in. She became part of Jubilee's X team in Generation X Volume 2 Number 2 in 2017. But after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity was and is doing to the Earth and to nature, she instead became an eco-warrior fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world, so she can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, animals, plants, and natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the Earth. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities, and more recently, she mutated even more and became even more uncontrollable, but she looks pretty awesome, so we can let that kind of thing slide. Debuting in Powers of X Number 1, which released in early 2019, Rasputin 4 is one of the more interesting recent additions to the X-Men, but she's also one of the most overpowered. Created as possibly the most powerful of Mr. Sinister's chimeras, which were basically spliced together mutants who possess more than one hero's power, Rasputin 4 possesses 5 different powers. 5. She has the osmium metal skin of Colossus, the telekinesis and telepathy of Quentin Quire, the force fields of Gunther Bane, aka Unis the Untouchable, the intangibility of Kitty Pryde, and just to top it all off, she has the healing factor of X-23 Laura Kinney. So as you can imagine, she is a force to be reckoned with. And on top of that, she wields the Soul Sword. Currently, as far as I've read, Rasputin 4 is working pretty closely with Charles Xavier to fight back against Orcus and others during the fall of X. Now while she was initially controlled by Sinister, he himself undid that, and together the two actually saved the entire universe, with Rasputin doing most of the heavy lifting. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red Number 1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Now Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and she first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the highest earning CEOs in India. While I think that's pretty awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Now her limitations at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. Trinary was one of the mutants recorded to X-Corps by Mirage following the mutant massacre at the Hellfire Gala. With WizKid, Trinary helped to run X-Corps Island and keep it cloaked away from Orcus. Next up, Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men Number 1 in 2012, when we also first saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with her friends, and a boy, when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with said boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to just pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and took her in. She has been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which she uses as a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected, and she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over her powers from time to time, there is no doubt that she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Although initially introduced in 2010, Jimmy Hudson was actually the son of Wolverine and Magda Lencher, but crucially in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now he would go on to join that universe's X-Men as Wolverine following the passing of the original Wolverine, but then, following the events of Secret Wars, Jimmy found himself within the main Marvel Universe in X-Men Blue number 5, where he is tracked down in the Canadian wilderness by the time-displaced original X-Men, who he attacked, believing they were working for Mr. Sinister. After fending off an attack by Sinister's new team of Marauders, the X-Men offered him a place on the team. Now Jimmy would remain a part of the team throughout the series, aiding them in various different missions, such as an adventure in outer space that saw him bonded with the Poison symbiote, and those two have been having a bit of an identity crisis. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are if we're being honest, Fabio Medina, aka Egg, and his battle cry Gold Balls is kind of awesome. Debuting in 2013, Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something, and it is hilarious. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, that's pretty odd, but these gold balls are actually more useful than initially thought. After he moved to Krakoa with the other mutants, it was discovered that Gold Balls' balls are actually infertile eggs, and if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. So yes, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at Sentinels and bad guys were actually infertile, bouncy golden eggs. Does it make me slightly uncomfortable? Yes, but he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was really cool. Next up, Gabby Kinney, aka Scout, also at one point known as Honey Badger, may be young, but she has more than proved herself when she became a part of the X-Men in 2018. Scout is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and a crazy regenerative healing factor that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine number 2 in 2015, and she had a long history that, just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura Kinney, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red number 1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout and one of the main Wolverine family members. Also, her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared a pretty immediate bond, and he is basically her pet and sidekick, which is just so cool to me. Becoming an X-Men member in 2012 in New Mutants Volume 3 number 45, Blank is the mutant leader of the Exiles, a group responsible for the repairing of timelines and worlds of the multiverse. She has the gift of teleportation, but unlike characters like Nightcrawler, Blank's teleportation abilities work through portals. This is really useful as she can teleport a whole group of people, and she can teleport others specifically through the use of javelin-like energy that she can throw at whatever or whoever she wants to teleport. These javelins can also be used to make opponents unconscious when it hits them. She is an exceptional fighter, having trained under Sabretooth, and she needs that skill, especially as she leads the Exiles. Also, fun fact, she had her live-action debut in the X-Men Days of Future Past movie. During that super awesome intro where the X-Men fight the Sentinels, Blink is the mutant throwing all the pink portals around and being awesome, until she got. Then she stopped. And last up for today, Multiple Man is an interesting choice for this list, as he has been around for a really long time in comics, but while he has been a hero for a good chunk of that time, he is still only a recent addition to the X-Men. Multiple Man was recruited in 2019's Uncanny X-Men Volume 5 number 13. Jamie or James Madrox is actually a changeling, which is sort of like a genetic precursor to mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of its own. One of the real benefits of this power though is that Prime Madrox will retain any memories of any of his dupes. So let's say you have to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all their memories of each book. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use his ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. He's definitely one of my favorite mutants. There aren't many X-Men members who have only joined the team in the past decade, but for you nerds, I have managed to find some more. First appearing in Extraordinary X-Men number 17 in December of 2016, Lucid, aka Maya Jackson, was a mutant whose powers developed faster compared to most other mutants. By the age of 10, she had the ability to see through solid objects, and she had big aspirations to join up with her heroes, the X-Men. When the M-Pox crisis broke out, however, Maya was visited by Iceman and Magic at her family's home and was offered the chance to move to the safe zone of X-Haven in Limbo. Unfortunately, Maya's mother refused to leave her home, and Maya later fell ill to M-Pox, and her mother fled to X-Haven just a little bit too late. Maya's condition had worsened to the point that not even mutant healers could help her. With Maya on her deathbed, her sister managed to get the current leader of the X-Men, Storm, to meet Maya, and just a few moments before she passed away, Maya was officially made a member of the X-Men under the alias she had created for herself, Lucid. She may not be the most powerful of the characters on this list, but her story is pretty powerful, and I like it. Now this next mutant isn't very new to the X-Men, as he first appeared in New X-Men Volume 2, number 7 in December of 2004, but I actually didn't even know he existed until writing this list. His name is Paris Gavaskar, aka Indra. Indra comes from a region outside of Mumbai, India, and when his mutant power of being able to summon a retractable exoskeleton manifested, he enrolled as a student at the Xavier Institute and moved to the United States. Initially, Paris was placed on Alpha Squadron under the watchful eye of Northstar. Paris was one of the few mutants at the Xavier Institute to retain his powers after End Day, and he was one of the young mutants to take part in a sparring exercise to determine the new X-Men roster, despite the fact that he holds pacifist beliefs. He would later move to San Francisco with the other X-Men before being attacked, losing his powers, and then gaining a power boost, being able to produce psionic armor and offensive tools. He would side with Wolverine during the Schism event and relocated to Krakoa in the modern age. Next up, first appearing in X-Men Blue number 6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade, which is the coolest name ever, was part of the ruthless mutant vigilantes who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. This group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Now Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. That is super cool, but also kind of terrifying. She joins Polaris's makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue number 25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Now this one may be a bit of a controversial pick. Marvel has been doing some interesting things with the character of Kamala Khan recently. Kamala has been a favorite of many Marvel fans as Miss Marvel since her first appearance in 2014. When she first gained her powers, it was due to her being exposed to the Terrigen Mist and undergoing inhuman Terrigenesis. Kamala discovered she was now a polymorph and could change her body into virtually anything. Cool, so she's an Inhuman. She was mega popular and joined a bunch of different teams, including the Avengers. Very recently though, Kamala actually ended up biting the dust in a very high profile and pretty controversial move in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man number 26. But then, in X-Men The Hellfire Gala 2023 number 1, Miss Marvel was resurrected on on the mutant nation of Krakoa. Charles Xavier then explains to Kamala that she was able to be resurrected because of her latent X gene, and that apparently he has known her to be a mutant for quite some time. Xavier explains that she is in fact a mutant and an inhuman, something that should be impossible because the Terrigen Mists are supposed to take the lives of those who possess an X gene. But because Kamala underwent Terrigenesis, her X gene never actually manifested her powers yet. Now she's running around with the X-Men, admittedly not doing very much. Angelica Jones, also known as Firestar, has the awesome mutant ability of microwave energy manipulation and generation. She uses the Earth's magnetic field and converts it into microwave radiation. She also absorbs microwave radiation from her environment and from stars in the galaxy. She can then focus this energy at targets or to do different things. She can set targets on fire, explode them, and even melt them. She is constantly keeping her powers in check because she has the potential to damage the entire Earth and its atmosphere with her abilities, which is why she is even more powerful in space, where she isn't limited by the fragility of the Earth. Now, Angelica first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 193 in February of 1985, but crucially, she was actually a villain. She was loyal to Emma Frost and her school of mutants, and would be on the Hellions, the New Warriors, the Avengers, and the Young Allies before she joined the X-Men in Amazing X-Men Volume 2 number 1 in 2013. And she has been on different iterations of the team, even serving as the secret double agent within Orchis during the current Fall of X event. Speaking of the Fall of X, when Orchis made their attack on Krakoa at the most recent Hellfire Gala, it was quite literally just as the new team of X-Men were finally announced. Among that team of mutants was Prodigy, aka David Alain. Growing up, David was always bright and intelligent, but when his mutant powers activated, his intelligence seemed to double and answers became almost instant for him. That's because his mutant ability is to telepathically absorb the knowledge and skills of anyone nearby. I wish I had that power. Although he first appeared in 2003, he was first placed on Moonstar's New Mutants training squad and went on to join the New X-Men in 2008, and has been on X-Factor Investigations, New Mutants, the Champions Reinforcement Roster, the Young Avengers, the New Mutant Squad, all before finally making it onto the actual premier X-Men team, only to be completely obliterated by Nimrod. Sorry. Now, all the way back in the day, when Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X gene and abilities were activated following M-Day. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. IJ Onkokwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta State when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her entire village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope Summers and with the consent of Cyclops, Okonkwo, who took on the name Oya, and the other Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Oya's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold, and vice versa. Now, Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010, and under the name Tempest, she will be joining a new group of X-Men led by Cyclops later this year, alongside another interesting new X-Man. Although Kane Marco, also known as the Juggernaut, has been around since 1965 and had an on-again, off-again relationship with the X-Men ever since Uncanny X-Men number 425 from June of 2003, when he first joined the team, it never really stuck. He would return to a life of villainy, usually thanks to Sidorak, who isn't really a fan of helping people. Therefore, it is totally valid, in my mind, to say that Juggy only really joined the X-Men for reals in Uncanny X-Men Volume 5 number 16 from 2019. The X-Men were fighting the latest incarnation of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, led by an imposter Magneto. Juggernaut didn't like that he was working for an imposter, so he took down the imposter and decided to join the X-Men. He would be voted on to the newest incarnation of the X-Men at the most recent Hellfire Gala before almost the entire team was brutally decimated by Orcus. When Marvel relaunches their X-Men titles in the summer of 2024, this year, Juggernaut is on the roster for the main Cyclops-led X-Men team alongside Beast, Magneto, Psylocke, Kid Omega, Temper, and Magic. But speaking of the X-Men relaunch that is happening, we are getting 3 main X-Men titles. There is just the X-Men, which is the team that Juggernaut is on, led by Cyclops, but we will also have the Uncanny X-Men, which is a team led by Rogue, with Wolverine, Gambit, Nightcrawler, and Jubilee, and in Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero's Exceptional X-Men, Kate Pryde, Shadowcat, will become a mutant teacher again in Chicago, working with Emma Frost, and 3 entirely new young mutants named Bronze, Axo, and Melee. Being so new and with their book not starting for a few more months, we actually have basically no information on any of these mutants. The only thing I could really find here is another character named Melee, who first appeared in 2007 as part of the Civil War 50 States Initiative, and she doesn't have any information outside of that era of Marvel, and she wasn't even a mutant that we know of. So it seems that this new Melee and her 2 new X-Men newbies are freshly created for the new Exceptional X-Men title, so I'm excited to learn more. But finally, we arrive at Synch. Synch has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Synch can copy the powers of other mutants. But unlike Rogue, Synch has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Synch got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Synch not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but he's also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is on Mars. Synch's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Synch documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Synch even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredibly significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's hard to be surprised that he's getting power boosts. Starting off at number 10, we have Forget-Me-Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know. Mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget-Me-Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget-Me-Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget-Me-Not's existence. Clearly that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got I-Boy. Why is a guy named I-Boy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again. Number 7. Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself, but of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor, and obviously she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabrielle Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine. Number 6. It's Synch. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022. Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Quan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Zed Zorn, joined more than a few years later. Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team. Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men #1 in 2012, when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours, until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level, with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she's a member of the Five, to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Number 2, Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1. Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men. Coming in at number 10, it's Pickles. I think his name alone just made me want to include him on this list. Pickles is what is known as a Banff, a race of demons who are basically little Nightcrawler-like imps, who possess similar attributes and powers as Nightcrawler and Azazel. Pickles himself lived inside Beast's van and was a backup in case anyone needed immediate transport somewhere, but he would later travel with Jean Grey and the X-Men in Jean Grey number 1 from 2017. As a Banff, Pickles can teleport by displacing himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it, and then return to the original dimension at a certain distance from the point of departure. But unlike Nightcrawler, Pickles doesn't require foreknowledge of his destination in order to safely teleport there. But much like Nightcrawler, Pickles can stick to objects with the surface of his hands and feet, and he's got a sweet little prehensile tail. This little imp also possesses an unknown degree of muscle memory mimicry, which enables him to quickly learn and perform new martial arts with little instruction or training. He's definitely one of those few minor X-Men characters, but he's just so cute. Number 9. Gazing Nightshade. First appearing in X-Men Blue number 6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade was part of a ruthless mutant vigilante group who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. The group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow, fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. I mean, that's not the coolest thing. She joins Polaris' makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue number 25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Number 8. Trinary. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red number 1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the biggest earning CEOs in India. That's pretty cool. And while I think that's awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology, such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Her limitation at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. It just remains to be seen. Number 7. Gabby Kinney. We included Laura Kinney on the last list, so is it cheating to use her clone? I personally say no, because Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger and recently Scout, is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and crazy regenerative healing factor, and that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine number 2 in 2015, and she had a long history that, just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister, and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red number 1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout, and one of the main Wolverine family members. Oh, also her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared an immediate bond, and he is basically her pet, which is both really cool and kind of hilarious. Number 6. Gentle. Although Nesno Abidemi, son of a Wakandan woman and a Russian man, first appeared in 2006, he was only a student at the Xavier Institute until he joined the X-Men in 2009's Uncanny X-Men. Because of his father, Gentle was never treated right in Wakanda, even by his own mom, which is a little hypocritical because, you know, she got pregnant with a dude, but whatever. He was raised at the Wakandan royal court and was sent to the Xavier Institute by Aurora Monroe when his powers first manifested. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle with a Sentinel, and his strength is said to rival Colossus, with his resting strength increasing every time he uses his powers. Because of his poor treatment though, he suffered from psychological trauma, which caused him to suffer great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive, with the added side effect of looking sick. Number 5. Oya. When Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X gene and abilities activated. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. Idie Okonkwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta state when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope, and with the consent of Cyclops, the Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Idie's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold, and cold to generate heat, and vice versa. Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010. Number 4. Armor. Hisako Ichiki lived in Tokyo, Japan with her brother and parents when her mutant abilities activated, and she joined the Xavier Institute. She first appeared becoming just a student and member of Kitty Pryde's Paladin Squad in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 in 2004, and would go on to become a member of the New X-Men after participating in Emma Frost's Battle Royale in New X-Men Volume 2 number 23 and 26. But finally, she officially joined the main X-Men team in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 number 25 in 2008. Hisako's powers are pretty cool. As you might suspect from her name, Armor can generate strong, powerful, durable, and impenetrable psionic exoskeleton armor around her entire physical body that augments her strength, endurance, stamina, agility, invulnerability, and durability. The power of her abilities are greatly tied to her family and bloodline. So, for example, the strength, power, and size of her psionic armor greatly enhances when her relatives pass away. Which, I mean, if she was a villain, that could go south pretty quick. But luckily she's not, so we're good. Number 3. Bloodstorm. This is probably a bit of a spicy choice for this list. Bloodstorm is none other than Aurora Monroe, only she is from a different universe. Earth 21710 to be specific. This version of Aurora was a thief living in the streets of Egypt when she attempted to pickpocket a man who turned out to be Dracula. She was turned into a vampire and eventually managed to free herself from Dracula's control and find new purpose among the X-Men. Unfortunately for her though, her thirst for blood overpowered her, which resulted in her ending at least both Beast and Professor X. But it could have been more. She was recruited by the Goblin Queen of Earth 91240 as one of her Hexmen, and they invaded Earth 616, where Bloodstorm decided to switch sides and help the time-displaced X-Men Blue team. She was eventually recruited to the team by Cyclops. Now this is obviously Aurora Monroe, and even if she is from another universe, she is still extremely powerful. But on top of that, she has all the powers of vampirism, including being capable of transforming her body into mist and a flock of bats, and using her gaze to hypnotize people into doing her bidding. Number 2. Genesis. Honestly, don't know how y'all are gonna feel about this one. Evan Sabanur was created by Fantomex as a clone of Apocalypse, and as such has a lot of his powers, including superhuman strength, superhuman durability, and self-molecular manipulation, meaning Evan has total control over the molecular structure of his own body, enabling him to alter his form at will. He is able to transform his limbs into various weapons and equipment, such as blades and bludgeons for combat, or rocket boots for flight, as well as being able to alter his body to change in size. Evan also has a healing factor that can regenerate from serious injury like getting gashed by Daken's claws. And he can adapt his body to any disease or environment at will, and sometimes subconsciously. Another small, innocent ability Evan has is the potential for virtually any conceivable superhuman power ever. He once showcased fire or plasma breath when fighting Faithful John's mind drones, and also has a degree of energy projection, able to project dematerializer blasts from his eyes and emit energy blasts from his hands. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Force number 7 in 2011, but wasn't on the X-Men team until 2014, and even then, kind of as a student. As the clone of Apocalypse, Evan will potentially develop any of the powers possessed by him, but it also means people do fear him, which leaves him with a bit of an insecurity. And number 1, Darwin. Even somewhat casual fans of the X-Men know who Darwin is, if only because he was that guy who is supposed to be able to adapt to anything but gets de-lifed in like 2 seconds in the X-Men First Class movie. People were mad. And honestly, yeah, so was I. That makes no sense. Adapt to this, shut up. He literally could have. Armando Munoz, or Darwin, was first introduced in X-Men Deadly Genesis number 2 in December of 2005, and he would join the X-Men shortly after that. Darwin's powers are just the coolest. He's able to adapt to any situation. So basically, using his powers, he's been able to grow functioning gills after being submerged in water, gain night vision after being in the dark for several seconds, be able to survive without oxygen when in space, his skin has become fireproof when it's exposed to flames, and after touching Hela, Darwin became a death deity and gained powers similar to Hela, including immortality, Asgardian physiology, and control over life and death. There was even a time his intelligence increased itself to understand the Shi'ar language by looking at it in written form. Although sometimes his powers do not always take the effect he wants, like, for example, during his fight with the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle rather than supplying a power that would actually allow him to defeat the Hulk, which is kind of hilarious, to be honest.
Number 10. Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the vampire nations going ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head to head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there. Number 9. Cyclops Lass. So Cyclops Lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops Lass. Cyclops Lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops Lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more mutant lists, please let us know by hitting that like button. It really does help us out at the channel, and it lets us know that you want more X lists, which honestly I like giving you all the X-Men things, so yes, let's do it. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of new mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional new mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous. Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a new mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops Lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gimmick's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shapeshifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, is pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. There's like a version of them, I think, that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxime and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxime can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxime and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxime and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutants series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Woo! However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point. Number 5. Bay the Blood Moon. Bay the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arakko mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine, so we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle-solving duels, food-eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bay were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4. Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Hominis Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hominis Verendi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3. Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-Books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2. Arakko. Arakko is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arakko were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arakko made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arakko attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arakko and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arakko and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arakko, to the now alive planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet-Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arakko. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people, uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants of Arakko. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12, but we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later. Dive into the lesser known corners of mutant lore as we unravel remarkable characters who have graced the pages of X-Men comics but might not yet be on your radar. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It is me, Amanda McKnight, aka VampX13, but you can call me Vampy. From the incredible abilities of Lifeguard, who honestly she has some pretty crazy abilities, to the mysterious origins of Ariel. Yeah, not the Little Mermaid. Join us on a journey through the extraordinary tales of these overlooked members who have left their unique imprint on the X-Men universe. I mean, I personally think all mutants have. As we count down the top 10 X-Men members you've never seen before. Share your favorite member of the X-Men in the comments. Number 10. Sway. I am straight up just enamored with Sway. Her abilities are truly remarkable, and the backstory of her origin is both captivating and honestly heart-wrenching. Sway's extraordinary powers first emerged during her teenage years. While preparing for college in New York City, Suzanne and her parents found themselves unwittingly caught in the crossfire of a gang war. Tragically, Suzanne's parents lost their lives in this attack, but miraculously, she somehow survived. Well, thanks to her newfound ability to manipulate time. In a moment of instinct, when her powers first manifested, Suzanne halted the trajectory of the bullets that were aimed at her, saving herself. However, lacking the experience and comprehension and finesse needed, she couldn't extend the same protection to her parents, who of course, as I said, perished. Sway's unique powers grant her control over the flow of time in her immediate vicinity. She possesses the ability to rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to revisit and analyze past events. Utilizing her temporal manipulation abilities, Sway embarked on a mission to track down her parents' assailants, ultimately aiding the police in apprehending the criminals responsible for the tragedy. It was during this revelation of her extraordinary powers to law enforcement that she actually came to the attention of Moira McTaggart and subsequently joined up with the X-Men. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when we talk mutants, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot, though perceived by some as a mutant, rejects this classification himself. Believed to be a clone and potentially both the father and son somehow of Shatterstar, his existence is entangled in the peculiarities. His existence is entangled in the peculiarities of a Mojoverse-based time loop, a fate shared with Shatterstar and, to some extent, Spiral, and honestly kind of a little bit of Dazzler too, potentially. Despite Longshot being a genetically engineered mutant and clone of Shatterstar, he adamantly denies identifying as a mutant. The X-Men quickly embraced Longshot upon discovering him, and he promptly joined forces with the team in confronting Mojo. Initially grappling with amnesia, Longshot spent a significant portion of his early adventures with the X-Men attempting to reclaim his own lost memories. Number 8. Dupe. Despite Dupe's eccentric nature, his status as a mutant remains unconfirmed. His origin is honestly shrouded in mystery even at this point, leaving room for speculation that he could be a mutant, he could be an alien, or he could even be a being just from another dimension. The lack of explicit verification makes him a peculiar addition to this list, although he clearly isn't the only non-mutant to join the X-Men team, as we just established, though he might just be one of the quirkiest additions, mutant or not. Dupe has engaged in numerous adventures with the X-Men, serving as the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning working for Wolverine. His presence on Krakoa suggests that, despite his as of yet still unknown origin, he really is at home among mutants, emphasizing his enigmatic connection to the mutant world, which continues to be really strong. Number 7. Match. While you may be familiar with the Pyros, have you encountered Match? Match, also known as Ben Hamill, debuted in the New Mutants before appearing in the new X-Men series. His abilities revolve around pyrokinesis, granting him mastery over fire, which he can generate, and making him immune to fire attacks and heat. Although Match hasn't been prominently featured for a while in the comics, he actually once led the X-Men adjacent team known as the Paragon Squad. He competed for a spot on Emma Frost's X-Men team and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 6. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton, initially known as Jermaine Zardos, the adopted sister of Nightcrawler, a mutant and member of the X-Men, adds a layer of unexpected, complexity to her and Nightcrawler's relationship, as also one of Kurt's significant love interests. Yeah, you heard me right. The complexity begins when, while adopting the alias Amanda, she actually investigates Kurt's actions following their brother Steven's death, which was actually blamed on Kurt. Jermaine assumes the persona of Amanda Sefton during this undercover operation, and it's during this period that Kurt basically develops feelings for her, oblivious to the fact that Amanda is, in fact, his adopted sister Jermaine. Somehow. Known more commonly now as Amanda in the comics, she is a formidable sorceress. Now, while not a mutant, she has proven to be a valuable ally to the X-Men and actually a member of their unofficial Muir Island X-Men team. Number 5. Adam X. Enter Adam X, a noteworthy figure in the convoluted Summers family tree, and trust me, it is. We did a whole bunch of videos on it. It's complicated. As the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, his lineage is tied to Catherine Summers and the Shi'ar Emperor Deccan Naramani. Although some have debated Adam X being part of the Naramani family tree and have suggested that he is also a son of Corsair and Catherine, basically making him a full Summers, I have actually seen no evidence from the comics to support this theory, so as far as I know, it's still just a theory. Debuting in the 90s, Adam X's origin story echoes the iconic characteristics of pretty much a quintessential 90s character. Abducted as a baby from a genetic lab, he was raised by Jonath, his adoptive father. His mutant abilities emerged, allowing him to internally ignite others' blood, causing intense internal burns. He can also ignite his own blood, inflicting pain, but apparently gaining a speed boost as a result. Eventually, Adam X discovers his hybrid nature, part Shi'ar, part mutant. Sounds pretty 90s to me. Number 4. Ariel. Ariel hails from Coconut Grove, an extraterrestrial planet, and possesses the mutant ability of persuasion. Additionally, her alien physiology grants her teleportation capabilities. Notably, she is connected to another Ariel, her ancestor, who visited Earth and served as the inspiration, apparently, for William Shakespeare's play The Tempest, in terms of Marvel canon. The Ariel in focus here, not her predecessor, arrived on Earth on a mission to gather mutant samples for study, as her people were intrigued by Earth's mutants' evolutionary processes. During her stay on Earth, she became associated with the Fallen Angels and later crossed paths with the X-Men in San Francisco, actually joining them temporarily. Number 3. Lifeguard. Heather Cameron, known as Lifeguard, is a mutant whose abilities activate in response to life-threatening situations, hence her codename, providing her with the necessary skills to save lives, including her own life. Her codename was initially her job title, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia with her brother Davis. There are implications of her having an unknown Shi'ar heritage, though it was never fully explored. While she made a reappearance in Dawn of X at the Green Lagoon Bar in Krakoa, it would be exciting to witness her take on a more prominent role in the comics due to the uniqueness and utility of her powers. Honestly, she's so powerful, I don't know why she isn't featured more. Probably because she is so powerful, but still. Not enough love. Number 2. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leyu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brothers, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of solar flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both cover their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leyu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear as a member of the X-Corps team. Number 1. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formations. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day Petra believes she may have accidentally caused. She used her powers to escape and basically became a runaway. Discovering her ability to turn coal into diamonds, she would use those diamonds to pay for a place to sleep, but of course this drew suspicion and she was tracked down by the police. Fortunately, as I said, Moira managed to intercept her and offered her a place as part of her team. Number 10. Cherub. Cherub is another of the Children of the Atom we got to know over the course of their 6-issue series. Cherub is Gabe Brathwaite. His powers, or the alien tech that allows him to appear to have powers, grant him the ability to fly with his winged suit and also allow him to emit sonic blasts. His powers are similar to Banshee and Angels. We also know that he is a fan of Forge and Dazzler, as he also went to go get Forge's autograph and attended a Dazzler concert with his friends and fellow Children of the Atom members. He makes his first appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 9. Dr. James Boggs. Dr. James Boggs made his first appearance in Wolverine issue 11 of the current 2020 series run, volume 7 overall of Wolverine. Dr. James Boggs was a doctor who was recruited by the Vampire Nation to study Wolverine's blood and find a way to use it to eliminate vampires' weaknesses. He began to question the morality of what he was doing, but then he was forced to keep working for Dracula and the Vampire Nation when they transformed his lab assistant into a vampire and made him one of his test subjects. However, this also inspired Dr. Boggs to betray Dracula, causing him to join forces with Omega Red, who was also coerced into working with Dracula and the Vampire Nation initially, but decided to betray them in order to truly join forces with his new home of Krakoa. In the end, Boggs was killed, but the attack against the Vampire Nation was successful. He will likely be one of the main casualties in what will become an all-out war against the Vampire Nation. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more X-Men lists, yes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Nighty Nightcrawler. So I know that technically everyone still keeps calling him Daycrawler, but Jason Thomas himself insisted he wanted to be renamed Nighty Nightcrawler during his time on the Children of the Atom team. And so I'm going to honor his request. Nighty Nightcrawler it is. Jason is the younger stepbrother of Marvel Guy, aka Benny Thomas, and the two near the end of the series get to have a really touching moment where we learn that Benny really does care about his younger stepbrother, despite seemingly resenting his new family members and dynamic. Nighty Nightcrawler's powers also come from alien tech like most of the rest of the Children of the Atom, and like his name implies, they are similar to Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner's powers, allowing him to teleport and modified to produce Nightcrawler's signature BAMF sound. BAMF! Number 7. Marvel Guy. Marvel Guy is Benny Thomas, stepbrother to Jason and also a member of the Children of the Atom. While Benny is a big Wolverine fan, his powers given to him by alien tech are more comparable to Jean's, hence his name Marvel Guy. However, they are also a lot more restrictive than Jean's power set, which at this point allows her to do just about anything. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I also kind of feel like Marvel Guy's costume is a little bit more of an homage towards Wolverine, which I think is pretty cute. Like the other Children of the Atom, Marvel Guy has pieces of an older version of Magneto's helmet built in to protect him against telepaths. And he also possesses gloves which emit pheromones, allowing him to control and influence the minds of others. In most cases, he uses this to put his enemies to sleep, which I think is like the best way you could use those powers without being problematic. to be fair. Number 6. Jeff Bannister. Jeff Bannister is an ally and later friend of Wolverine's and a CIA agent who first appears in Wolverine issue number 1 of the current series and will likely show up again in the series in the future. He teamed up with Wolverine to learn the source of and put a stop to a deadly new drug that had surfaced called the pollen. Together he and Wolverine tracked down the Flower Cartel and the Pale Girl, who was initially thought to be a shared hallucination brought on by the drug, though we'd later learn that she was actually a real person. Jeff Bannister also has a daughter who suffered from cancer. After Bannister worked with and befriended Wolverine, Logan was actually able to help his daughter by getting her immediate access to Krakoan medicines, which helped to cure her. Logan also gifted Bannister a Krakoan gate following their adventure together. Number 5. Pale Girl. While the Pale Girl might be a new character who hasn't appeared too much just yet, her role in the Wolverine story arc in which she appeared was pretty important, and the revelation about her character and just who she was also pretty important, and will likely lead to a huge ramification later on in the world of X-Men. As I said before, the Pale Girl was initially thought to be some kind of shared hallucination for those who use the pollen, until she was caught on camera. We'd later learn that the Pale Girl was actually a mutant, Meredith Milley. Meredith Milley was a secret dealer of the pollen and the one who was responsible for delivering shipments to the Order of the X from the Flower Cartel, which seemed to be Russian in origin and tied to mutants working for Russia. The Pale Girl was the missing piece to this puzzle and was also revealed to be a powerful mutant who, while appearing ghostly, could also take control of the minds of her victims, bending them to her will. Number 4. Death. Death is one of the children of Apocalypse and his wife Genesis. He is one of the original 4 Horsemen members, which also adds an extra dimension to the fact that Apocalypse generally is referred to any of his 4 Horsemen groups formed thereafter as his children. Although I guess he also kind of thinks of all mutants as his children, so there is that too. But Death is his actual and biological child. One of, anyways. Death ended up being the chosen champion for the Arakko tournament. He fought against Storm and was defeated. Their battle and just the focus on Storm and all of her struggles up till this point during it was amazing, and I wouldn't be surprised, as Death and Storm both also had a few flirty moments together, if we didn't see the two of them end up face to face again. I should also mention that Storm won her fight against Death while also being temporarily depowered. Yeah, because Storm is a badass. You can check out that fight in 2019's X-Force issue number 14. Recently, Death showed up in the current Wolverine series where he was approached by Logan and his vampire hunter friend, Louise, and asked to help them in their fight against Dracula and the Vampire Nation, to which he agreed. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, didn't he die at the end of the Ten of Swords tournament? He was like kind of torn apart? He didn't. He turns up in Cephalith later and he's alive. Don't worry about it, it's comics. I don't know if he's a vampire or he's just death so he can't die. I don't know. Number 3. Psylocke's daughter. Psylocke's daughter doesn't have a name just yet, but is a character that was hugely focused on in the Fallen Angel series. If you are a Psylocke fan and you wanted a Quantum-focused series, I highly recommend you check out that series. Psylocke teams up in the series with X-23 and Young Cable in an attempt to find out and rescue her daughter. In the end, Mr. Sinister is the one who ends up in possession of the child, who now leads a cybernetic existence within Apoth's remains, and uses her safety as a leverage in order to motivate Quantum to work for him as the leader of his Hellions team. While her daughter might not have a name yet, at least I don't think we've seen her with one, she was featured in an illusion created by Mastermind that Psylocke was trapped in issue 10 of Hellions. Another book that is a current recommended read for my Psylocke fans out there. And hopefully her daughter will get to come back and we'll get to see more of her. I think that could be cool. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is the sister-in-law to Apocalypse, being the sister of his wife Genesis. Her mutant ability is probably one of the coolest out there, along with Domino's luck ability. Iska's power is that she can never lose. She was one of the chosen champions of Arakko who competed in the Otherworld tournament in Ten of Swords, and of course won against her competitor, surprise surprise, the current Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock. Her powers, however, seemingly forced her to change sides in the war between the mutant nation of Arakko and Annihilation's Amenthi demons. She abandoned the mutants of Arakko, joining up with the Amenthi due to the fact that the mutants had become the losing side, and her power prevented her from ever losing. So a little bit into her history there. I like Iska a lot. Number 1. Horticulture. Horticulture is probably one of my favorite new villain teams and groups of characters we've seen thus far in the current line. And they also were someone that could probably threaten the entire Earth, so they might become like huge supervillains in the future. They are a team of elderly women who are scientists specifically working in the field of botany with plants. I don't know why I said with plants, that's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean. Botany, plants, those are things. Their goal is to eliminate a large chunk of the human population in an effort to return the Earth to a more natural and pristine state. Their leader is Augusta, and members include Lily, Edith, and Opal. It is possible there could be more members of Horticulture as well. These are just the 4 women that we are familiar with based on the 2019 X-Men series and Empire Limited series, where they appeared as enemies and for a short time during Empire, reluctant allies. We've also learned through the Avengers side of things that Harrower, Augusta's great niece, was a former member of the team who split off to do her own thing. Horticulture first made their appearance in volume number 5 of the X-Men in issue number 3. That's the 2019 X-Men series, not the 2021 one, which is the current one. Number 10, Prodigy. I feel like a lot of people maybe forgot about Prodigy, as he's been MIA for some time in the comics and was depowered during the events of M-Day. But with the magic of Krakoa and Dawn of X, he was able to return to us, being resurrected and also regaining his powers. 1. Prodigy happens to be a super genius, but this is also because he's a telepath with the ability to basically mimic anyone's skill set and share their knowledge while nearby. This has also been shown in the past to extend to fighting precognition, where he can basically use his abilities to read a person and predict their next move of attack in a battle, which is pretty sweet. He often also builds his own advanced tech, and even when depowered is known to possess a great level of intellect, making him a challenging adversary whether or not he has his mutant abilities. Even as a depowered mutant, you might not want to mess with him. Number 9, Lady Mastermind. Lady Mastermind, aka Regan Wingard, recently popped back up in the giant-sized Nightcrawler comics and was welcomed into the mutant nation of Krakoa. Some, however, may not know or appreciate her mutant history and background. Just who is Lady Mastermind? Well, she's the daughter of Jason Wingard, aka the original villain known as Mastermind. Her powers take after her father's, allowing her to create realistic illusions projected into her target's minds. While she also has an even lesser known suspected half-sister, Regan's powers are often depicted as being the more powerful between the two, with it even being said that her abilities are even more stronger than her father's. Additionally, she is also fairly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, a skill set her father actually very much lacked. He was hilarious in a fight. He's like a rag doll. Sorry Mastermind. Number 8, Gentle. Gentle is a mutant with the abilities of super strength. I know, very hilarious considering his name. He can grant himself immediate muscle mass that basically allows him to change size and increase his strength when needed. It is yet unknown just how strong Gentle can make himself, and he is also known for being someone who could potentially even take on the Hulk, although he is more of a pacifist, hence his name. Gentle's real name is Nezno Abidemi. I hope I'm saying that right. Nezno Abidemi. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's a hard one to say. He was raised in Wakanda, but always felt like an outsider because his father was Russian. When his mutant abilities surfaced, it was actually Aurora Monroe Storm, who was queen at the time in Wakanda, who encouraged him to be sent to the Xavier Institute so he could learn how to better control his powers. His vibranium tattoos are also meant to help him to control those powers. Also, vibranium tattoos are super cool, but I think they're also super painful to get, so maybe don't get them. You can't, because it's not a real substance, but still. Number 7, Egg. Fabio Medina might not seem like a powerful mutant based on his ability, but since his rise to the supremely important mutant group known as the Five on Krakoa, he can be considered one of the most important and powerful mutants around. When he combines his powers with that of the Five, he has control over life and death. Originally, the bouncy gold balls that he shot forth from his chest were believed to be nothing special, but it was later revealed that these balls were actually infertile eggs, which could be used in the process of resurrecting new mutants. Number 6, Tempest. Eva Bell is another member of the Five. She has actually appeared in less issues than Egg, if you can believe it, despite the fact that she has a pretty neat power set, and it's been neat since the beginning, which allows her to time travel. Tempest, as she used to be known, was able to control the passage of time in a specific pocket of space. She could also slow time in a current space that she also inhabited, either slowing time around her or creating time bubbles to manipulate time in that bubble, where she could speed it up or slow it down. The only challenge for her has been losing control of her powers, which can cause them to behave unpredictably. Still, controlling time is a pretty impressive and powerful ability to have. Number 5, Empath. Manuel de la Rocha made his first appearance in the original New Mutant series, where he was part of Emma Frost's team known as the Hellions. He's recently reappeared in the newest Hellion series from 2020 and proves just how powerful, but also how sadistic he can be. Empath's power is, you guessed it, empathy, and he can use use this power to not only sense others' emotions, but also to control them, in effect manipulating others into doing whatever he wishes them to do. His influence can be subtle, such that someone might not even realize they're being manipulated by him, or it can be more forceful, turning his victims into complete husks of their former selves and bending them fully to his will. Number 4. Vulcan. Vulcan is one of the most powerful mutants around, being an Omega level mutant, skilled in energy manipulation and absorption. Yet he is somehow the lesser known of all the Summers despite his insane power levels. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well, and use them for himself on the rare occasion. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1, and yet he is considered the most powerful of these three. Number 3. Orphan Maker and Nanny. Orphan Maker still remains a relatively mysterious character, though is also one who still proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. Orphan Maker is also known as Peter and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Mr. Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he decided to eliminate him. Nanny, an insane cyborg, however, saved him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Although I will say she's got a weird way of going about it. While insane, Nanny was also once a scientist and remains quite intelligent. She actually outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. While it's still unclear as to what Orphan Maker's true mutant powers are, and while he seems to still have the mind of a child, probably due to Nanny's manipulation, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, and he often uses pixie dust in battle to help Nanny influence and control the minds of their opponents, as she herself is a telepath, but a weak one, so she needs a little bit of help. Needs a little bit of pixie dust. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm Orphan Maker while he was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply reflecting off the armor, causing more harm than help really. Number 2. Trinary. Considering the modern age we live in, Trinary is a pretty powerful mutant. Her abilities allow her to control all tech that is within her line of sight. She has used these powers to move massive sums of money digitally and to manipulate and control Sentinel tech. Currently on Krakoa, Trinary is one of the few technopathic mutants trusted with the important project known as Sleeping Giant, wherein mutants monitor for upcoming advancement in Sentinel technology, such as Nimrods or the creation of a mother mold, so that they can ideally put a stop to its development. Project Sleeping Giant were instrumental in helping the X-Men to destroy a mother mold that Orchis was creating before it went online. Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. Now you might think I'm joking here if you happen to know the obscure Bailey Hoskins, but I'm really not. Bailey appeared in his own miniseries titled X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever. He was known for being the worst X-Man ever because his ability only allowed him to do one thing: explode. But he didn't have any regeneration powers, so he basically was a mutant who could never use his powers, otherwise he'd kill himself. It's kind of a one-hit wonder. So how is that powerful? Well, it's also implied in the series that when he does choose to sacrifice himself and blow up the villain of the story, that he makes it possible for Earth-616 to come into existence. So without him, we wouldn't have the main Marvel continuity that we know and love today, potentially. If saving the entire continuity from becoming a dystopian future isn't powerful, then I don't know what is. Number 10. Karma. Karma is a mutant with very specific powers, so it should surprise no one that she is part of the New Mutants team. I actually love the New Mutants for this reason. A lot of their members tend to be forgotten and yet are super powerful when their abilities are properly utilized. Xian Koiman possesses limited telepathic abilities, but can have a strong sense of sort of psychic projection. Karma can emit a wave of energy that disables her target's consciousness, allowing her to take over control of their body, experiencing what they experience as though she were actually in their body, sensing what they taste, hear, smell, see, and feel. Those she controls will awaken unaware, afterwards experiencing this possession as if they had just been in a dream and basically had been sleepwalking. She can also do this on a mass scale, possessing multiple people, though she must overcome many challenges in order to fluidly control multiple people at once. Number 9. Hijack. Hijack is David Bond, a technopath mutant who can use his abilities to telepathically control any vehicle. He's used his powers to control massive sentinels and even control an entire helicarrier. The rule seems to be if you can steer it, fly it, or drive it, Hijack can control it. Although it has been implied that the vehicle in question likely needs to have some kind of mechanical makeup. So sailboats are probably not something Bond could manipulate, unless you had a sailboat that also had an engine, which I think is a thing now. I don't think all sailboats are just sails. Still, in a world where we are surrounded by tech and tons of engine-powered vehicles, David Bond's abilities are pretty powerful. Alas, he has only appeared in less than 50 issues of comics. Someone tell me, where is David Bond now? Where is he on Krakoa? Is he there? I want to see him. Number 8. Summoner. Summoner is a new mutant whose name also signifies the type of mutant that they are. They are the child of Apocalypse's first horsemen of war. Arakko, the landmass itself, was drawn to Krakoa and Krakoa to it. The two fused together to increase the size of the land overall, although Arakko is not yet considered safe and is basically known as kind of the monster territory part of Krakoa. I mean, technically it still isn't Krakoa, but they're attached now, so they are each other. Summoner's abilities allow them to summon the dark beasts of Arakko. We don't know too much about them yet because they've only been in a few issues, but what we do know is that they can withstand the blast of one of Cable's thermal grenades, his last one in fact, without taking virtually any damage. So overall, they seem like they're going to be pretty crazy and powerful. X of Swords, I'm assuming we're going to see more about them. Number 7. Dust. Dust is Soraya Kadir. She was enslaved as a child but freed by the X-Men. Originally, she did not want to reveal herself to the mutants and hid herself by turning into scattered sand. When Jean Grey sensed her presence and encouraged Soraya to reveal and introduce herself, she did so by referring to herself as Turab, which is Arabic for dust. She can turn herself into dust and manipulate her body to move at high speeds, causing her to become a deadly sandstorm to her enemies. As sand particles, she can also enter the bodies of other people, causing internal damage. Dust is also resistant to magic and telepathic manipulation or detection while in her sand form. Dust is another person that I feel like we never see enough of in the comics. Someone bring back Dust. Number 6. Layla Miller. Layla's abilities, skills, and powers tend to be pretty specific, which means that she might not inherently seem powerful to readers. Layla has been shown to be able to reanimate beings, heal wounds, and appears to be immune to reality warping. She also has a lot of knowledge about her own future life and the events surrounding it, as she spent time in the future and then returned and uploaded all she had learned into her younger self when she returned to that Layla's present, which I guess was technically her past. Her vast knowledge often comes in handy and is what helped the mutants to figure out who was really after the baby mutant Messiah during the events of Messiah Complex. Her own knowledge has also technically helped her in gaining the knowledge that she has needed to have in order to gain it, if that makes any sense. Timey-wimey stuff. Number 5. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are twin siblings born to mutant parents. Their powers as such manifested when they were younger than most. They haven't been in a ton of comics, most about probably 11 issues, but they have been shown to be pretty deadly and powerful even as children, both in Extermination and recently in the newest run of New Mutants. Maxime can influence others' emotions while Manon can alter someone's memories, or recall their memories past. When combined, their powers actually allow them to manipulate the minds of others to the point that they can easily control them, shaping their victims into whatever they like them to be and making them do whatever they want. In issues 3 and 4 of New Mutants, both Maxime and Manon were captured along with Armor, Glob, Angel Salvador, Beak, and the couple's children, but managed to escape. Manon and Maxime helped to free the rest of the group by distracting their captives, manipulating one of them into killing the other. Number 4. Mirage. You might not recognize her mutant name, but if you've seen the New Mutants film, or you are familiar with the New Mutants at all, Mirage will be someone that you maybe know. Mirage is actually Daniel Moonstar. Standard X-Men fans may be less familiar with Dani, but she has also been one of the X-Men, and she is known for her affiliation with the New Mutants crew and all the female defenders who are also known as Valkyror. Dani herself became a Valkyrie when the New Mutants were kidnapped by Amora the Enchantress and taken to Asgard, so she doesn't just have her mutant power of illusion creation and telepathy, which originally she could only use to recreate the fear of others, but she also has some of the powers granted to Valkyries. Oh, and she can make cool psionic arrows too. Number 3. Strong Guy. Strong Guy has similar powers to another mutant we talked about on part 1 of this list. His abilities allow him to use kinetic energy to augment his strength, increasing it. However, he cannot hold the energy for long as it could severely harm him, distort his physical form, or even kill him. Still, even with the rule that he must expel any absorbed energy within less than 2 minutes of absorption, he is pretty powerful, using his powers to safely lift up to around 100 tons. Strong Guy's real name is Guido Carosella, and he first appeared in the original New Mutant series in issue 29. Number 2. A mutant with no name. In the alternate reality belonging to the Ultimate Universe of 1610, we got a story that introduced us to a mutant who had no name. This mutant's powers were so devastating that we were not permitted the time to get to know him. His powers had only just manifested, but they were so deadly that they caused the deaths of over 200 people in his hometown, including his parents and his girlfriend at high school, with the deaths being almost instantaneous. But there was no snapping involved. It wasn't a Thanos thing. No Infinity Gauntlets. His mutant power was basically to kill everything around him, radiating toxins and poisons that basically vaporize organic tissue. He was so dangerous, powerful, and deadly that Wolverine was sent to eliminate him, as the young mutant's existence posed too much of a threat to the mutant image, as well as both humans and mutants alike, just in general. Number 1. Matthew Malloy. Matthew Malloy is one of the strongest, most random mutants who now belongs to the alternate timeline of Earth 14923, because he was just too powerful to basically continue to exist. Like many of the most epic mutants, he had reality warping powers and was additionally considered Omega level in terms of his ability. Matthew's powers unfortunately were often tied to his emotions, which proved problematic and often resulted in massively destructive outbursts of energy. In the end, Tempest traveled back in time and, with help from Professor X of the past, was able to prevent Matthew's parents from ever meeting, meaning that he was never born. Number 10. Kid Cable. He might not be as powerful as the old man or as wise, or for that matter as powerful as some of the other youngsters on this list, but Kid Cable has a ton of potential, and to be fair, he is pretty powerful when it comes to outwitting people and working his way out of some pretty sticky situations. He also has the Summer family waiting in the wings to back him up when he needs. While their power is obviously not his own, having both his mom, Marvel Girl, and dad, Cyclops, as frequent allies, as well as his sister Rachel, is something that should be noted, because there are many times these days in the Dawn of X line where we see this family supporting one another and teaming up. Cable has his powerful telepathic and telekinetic powers, as well as his love of big guns and big swords, to help him qualify as one of the most powerful and sometimes resourceful teen mutants around. Number 9. Jubilee. Jubilee is one of those mutants who also has the potential to be even more powerful the older she gets. As a teenager, her powers were more unpredictable, but she still had that potential to create mass destruction using them. A lot of people think of Jubilee's powers as just being a fun display of fireworks, but she can actually create explosions on a subatomic level, meaning that she has the potential to go nuclear under the right conditions or with the correct amount of training. Her emotional connection with Wolverine gave Jubilee enough power to decimate part of Mandarin's castle when Logan was in danger. While Jubilee might not have seemed like the most powerful teen mutant, she definitely was capable of more than most give her credit for. So now she's pretty much all grown up though, with her son, who is currently a dragon, Shogo, to look after. But she was a teen once, and when she was a teen, she was pretty powerful. She was pretty cool. I like Jubilee, she's one of my favorites. Before we move on to our next point, just a reminder to give that like button a little click. Just give it a little click. It really helps us out on the channel and lets us know that you are loving these mutant lists. And who doesn't love mutant lists? I love mutant lists personally. Let me do more of them, please. Click the like. Number 8. Prodigy. Prodigy is one of the smartest mutants around, and even when he was depowered, he was still pretty powerful. David Elaine was always known for his intelligence, but when his mutant powers activated, he became even more brilliant. His powers allow him to telepathically absorb the knowledge and skill set of those around him. Initially, he worked towards not using his powers and keeping them a secret, trying to resist them because he felt that any knowledge gained this way while he was a student was sort of cheating, which, to be fair, I guess it kinda is. Eventually, he ended up joining the New Mutants and enrolling at the Xavier Institute. Even when he lost his powers, he was still considered to be one of the brightest now depowered mutants around, as he still had the knowledge and skills that he had already absorbed and learned telepathically. He still held on to that. But now he's back to being a mutant because Krakoa. Number 7. X-23, or as we know her now, just Wolverine. As Logan says, you just call yourself Wolverine, there can be two of us. Laura Kinney was created and raised to be a fighting machine. It was all her mother could do to sneak in some normalcy to her daughter's routine. Also, the story of how her creator was forced into bearing her and literally become her mother in that way is pretty messed up. But then again, Laura's whole story is pretty messed up, so there's that. Even as a little kid, she was trained to become an unstoppable killer, and even when she found her way to freedom and the X-Men, as well as Wolverine, her genetic father, who she was a female clone of, she wasn't even safe from a world of killing. She was such a good killer that Cyclops couldn't resist recruiting her to the X-Force, the mutant team that was sent in for less savory and more secretive Black Ops missions. Number 6. Elixir. Josh Foley's powers first manifested when he was just a teenager, like most mutants. Right away they were pretty powerful, allowing him to heal people who had life-threatening injuries on the verge of death. He was originally a part of the anti-mutant group known as the Reavers, who kicked him out after learning that he was a mutant, severely beating him when he wouldn't accept their rejection. He just wanted to hate mutants still, but no, you can't, cause you are one. Sorry. His parents also disowned him, and with nowhere to go, he was forced to join the Xavier Institute, despite not initially being interested in joining his fellow mutants. Elixir's powers were shown to be so powerful, even from a young age, that he could even heal powers that had been lost, giving Rain, who he had a crush on at the time, her powers back after she lost them when he kissed her. And to people who are like, but healers, are they that great? Because what if they get hurt? He can even heal himself, so yeah. Elixir's pretty cool. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. It's really hard when we are talking about Kitty because I personally just think her mutant powers as they stand are so overpowered. Just in my opinion. We also have to consider that Kitty Pryde kinda got fast-tracked during her time on the X-Men team. When Kitty joined the X-Men, she was basically a teenager and she was already pretty powerful. In fact, she could walk on air back in the original X-Men days. And Kitty also didn't have any trials on other like young X-Men teams. She was kind of just like put on the X-Men right out of the gate. So that is pretty crazy. Straight out of the gate, she was working with the pros. Of course, over time, she has had some of her weaknesses tweaked and even removed, but in exchange for some of her other secondary abilities kind of being lost. Teenage Kitty also went on tons of adventures that were just always seemingly adding and building on her skill set list. And even now as an adult, Kitty, or Kate as she currently prefers to be called, is still one of the most powerful and often, in my opinion, underrated mutants that we have on the X-Men roster today. Number 4. Magic. Magic is insanely powerful, even as a teenager, simply because she spent so long training with the powerful magic user turned demon who kidnapped her years ago, Belasco. Belasco wanted to harness Illyana's powers for himself, seeing her great potential. She eventually became so powerful that she defeated Belasco in his own dimension of Limbo. When she returned to her own dimension, escaping, she was no longer a little girl, though barely any time had passed on Earth while she was gone. It had only been seconds for her fellow mutants since she left, but for Magic it had been years, and she returned as a super powerful teenager with a strong connection to Limbo. While in Limbo, actually, Magic is basically a god, as being in Limbo puts her closer to her power source and effectively makes her almost undefeatable while there. Number 3. Jean Grey. Even when we see any teen versions of Jean, they are known for usually being very, very powerful. While we might now know Jean as an adult woman who is immensely powerful when she needs to be, or when the plot requires her to go into Phoenix mode and kind of act as a deus ex machina, we also have met younger versions of her thanks to various time traveling shenanigans. Even as a teenager and a child, Jean is often portrayed as being exceedingly powerful. In fact, when she originally met Xavier, her telepathic powers were so great that he was forced to put up mental blocks to protect her from them until she was better equipped to handle such an elevated level of power. And after a few adventures with the X-Men, she did get those blocks removed. She was ready. She was ready for the power. Number 2. Hope Summers. Even as a baby, Hope was super powerful. Hope's just blowing everybody else out of the water. She's like, I've been powerful since I was a little baby and I didn't even know what was going on. She was like, object permeance, what's that? But also, I have immense power. As a teenager, Hope was destined to be the new host of the Phoenix Force, but was prevented from connecting with the Phoenix. However, she was still instrumental in the Avengers vs. X-Men story when she helped Scarlet Witch to erase the Phoenix Force from existence near the end of that story. Even though that doesn't really make much sense now, given that apparently Scarlet Witch isn't a mutant and Hope's powers are to kind of amplify or adopt the powers of other mutants in her area, so that doesn't really make sense now, but anyways. Like Rogue, she can take on other other mutants' power sets and even take on multiple at a time. The difference being she doesn't need physical contact to do so, and it does not drain the powers of life energy or life energy of the mutants whom she is emulating. As a baby, she was powerful enough to heal Rogue with one touch, who at the time was dying and comatose. You also basically know you're powerful when you're a mutant when you get your powers earlier than your teen years. That just means you're like the most powerful. Number 1. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I can't have a list with a name like Teenage and Mutant in the title and not mention the TMNT. Even though I know everyone's probably like, but Amanda, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are not more powerful than Hope Summers. What are you talking about? But this is my list and I want them to be number 1. So that's how it goes. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are definitely some of the most powerful pizza-loving Teenage Mutant Turtles out there. They might not be as powerful in terms of taking other people's powers or becoming a host of the Phoenix Force, but I also bet if they were able to become the host of Marvel's Phoenix Force, were they in the same reality, they would potentially even give Jean and Hope a run for their money. The other thing that makes the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles so powerful is that there isn't just one of them, there's a whole team of them. And working together, there is almost no force of evil that they cannot stop. So many teenage powerhouses! And throughout the comics and movies, we've seen even more of these characters' backstories and their youthful potential explored. Honestly, there are just so many mutant prodigies out there, it's nice to highlight some of them and lift up some who may have momentarily been forgotten. Or at least their teen feats may have been forgotten. Number 10. Blackheath. Blackheath is Samuel Smithers. Yep, in the reality of 1610, Plant Man is instead a mutant. His powers are similar to that of Poison Ivy, allowing him to control plant life. Blackheath was one of the mutants who was kept in William Stryker's camps. While there, he ended up meeting and befriending Storm, and would be one of the few mutants left when Utopia came about. Number 9. Mach 2. Mach 2 is Nomi Bloom. She is kind of like the second coming of Magneto, but not as much of a villain. Or at least, she comes around in the end. And not inherently as powerful as Magneto was. She can basically affect and control magnetic fields. Later on, she would see a power boost which would enable her to have more control over objects containing metal. Mach 2 is also known for being a rival to Kitty in terms of her leadership over the surviving mutants of Utopia. People are going to be like, what is Utopia? And I'm going to be like, don't worry. We're getting to that much later, but it's coming. It's slowly you'll get little bits of information. Number 8. Zorn. In the reality of Earth 1610, Zorn is actually Zorn, but is not the only version of Zorn. Wow, that sounded confusing. What I mean to say is that Zorn is his own person, Kuan Yin, but has a sibling who's also named Zorn, but with a Z. They were each given their powers as part of the Southeast Asian Republic's Super Soldier program. Zorn with an X is the one who you typically see clad in the color white. He is an amazingly powerful telepath and telekinetic. While both characters may have been introduced later and have been somewhat short-lived, they are both presented as being pretty powerful during their time in the comics. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 7. Zorn. This is the sibling I was telling you about. Zorn with a Z or a Z is Shen Yin, the brother of Zorn with an X. His powers are much darker in nature. It's actually believed in the comics that Zorn and Zorn were sort of destined to bring a sense of balance to the world and mutant kind, symbolically sort of representing yin and yang, black and white. Zorn's powers are basically akin to a black hole. He emits a black hole energy and can use his powers to manipulate gravity. In the end, Zorn sacrifices himself when he realizes that he cannot win in the war against the Children of Tomorrow. In his death, he effectively becomes a black hole in retaliation. Number 6. Colossus. A strong mutant on Earth 616 and in 1610. Initially, Pyotr Rasputin did not possess super strength as part of his power set, but was given a drug called Banshee to enhance his strength, as well as a job working for the Russian mafia. Eventually, he ended up joining the X-Men, though he would leave the team on a few separate occasions. He'd managed to hold off Scarlet Witch, save a submarine that not even the Ultimates were capable of saving, and defeat Proteus, David Xavier, Xavier's son, who threatened the entire world with violence, traveling around and targeting international landmarks the world over. Differences between Colossus of Earth 1610 and that of Earth 616 is that here he isn't inherently strong, as I said before, in his steel form, but needs Banshee to give him that boost. And he's also gay. He even for a time dates fellow mutant Northstar. Number 5. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine. He also inherited his claws, superior senses, and regenerative healing factor. Like his dad, it's believed that his powers may actually be based in survival as opposed to just healing, with James being seen as adapting to survive injury or harsh environments as needed. Unlike Wolverine, Jimmy can choose to coat his claws in metal, as this is actually part of his power set, and it's believed that only his claws end up being coated, not the rest of his skeleton. Jimmy was a crucial member of the mutant resistance, which fought against Sentinel and militia attacks that threatened to wipe out the mutants. In the end, the mutants were victorious and were given a choice of going to live on their own piece of land in Utah or taking a cure for their mutation. Jimmy was one of the few mutants who decided to keep his powers. Number 4, Storm. Initially in the Ultimate Universe, Storm didn't have great control over her powers, and mostly got by stealing cars, but after the X-Men took her in, she learned how to control and even master her powers, allowing her to become one of the most fearsome and powerful mutants around. Ultimate Storm is so cool. Storm is so fast, she has been shown to be able to catch people who are falling in midair, dodge bullets, and even keep pace with a plane. Impressive considering planes on average travel at speeds over 540 miles per hour or over 870 kilometers per hour. That's fast. She's also likely not someone you want to tangle with, as even when she takes hits in battles, she tends to keep fighting or instinctively strike back. Using her lightning storm and weather control powers, she's also managed to defeat multiple opponents with one single attack, whether they be Sentinel opponents or human opponents, and in some cases, even killing them. I think at one point she kills like 11 people at once, and it's just like, okay. Don't mess with Storm. Got it. I mean, I already knew that before from her 616, but now I really know. Number 3, Jean Grey. In Ultimates, it almost seems there is nothing Jean can't do. Before she joined the X-Men, she was in a mental institution as the manifestation of her powers made her seem insane. However, Professor X would save Jean and recruit her on his X-Men team, with her being the second member. In the Ultimate Universe, we have seen Jean become possessed by what she thought was a cosmic entity referred to as the Phoenix God, and almost lose control and her sanity. The biggest problem with Jean is similar to that of her Earth 616 counterpart. Immense power threatens to basically break her mind, or at least take over her sense of sanity. In the comics, Jean is not only a skilled telepath, and was even able to read Wolverine's mind, something Professor X believed wasn't even possible, but she also happens to, weirdly enough, be a skilled doctor and surgeon as well, although I'm pretty sure she doesn't have any medical license. Say what? Jean was even shown to be capable of connecting and tapping into the multiverse to reach out and see various versions of herself. Basically, she can do everything, because being a telepath is crazy powerful. Number 2, Magneto. Obviously, one of the most powerful mutants out there has to be Magneto, not just for the powers of magnetism that he wields, but also just for his influence. Magneto was the mastermind behind Ultimatum. I suppose I should use the term mastermind lightly there, as Ultimatum in general is not really seen very favorably in most fans' eyes. I admit it was controversial and caused a lot of perhaps needless death. In fact, I would say it was needless death. But you have to acknowledge just how much of a threat it painted Magneto out to be. While I'm not sure about Magneto basically committing genocide as a victim of one himself, you have to admit that this made him one of the most fearsome characters in all of the Ultimate Universe. And for Magneto, there is power in fear, even though oddly enough, it is usually fear that tends to power the hate that he often stands up against. Number 1, Kitty Pryde. One of the most powerful characters as a leader especially. She ends up becoming the ruler of the mutant tent nation that the mutants dub Utopia. This is a portion of land in Utah that the mutants who choose not to accept the cure are given. In fact, all those who refuse to take the cure are forced to live there. Kitty ends up fighting a war against Jean Grey in the Ultimate Universe as well, because Jean wants Kitty to join the mutant nation that she was put in charge of ruling after the death of Zorn with an X, Xian. But Kitty refuses to bring their people together. Kitty is such a good leader, she even steps down from her title as the leader of Utopia to help ease the target on her own people's backs because of her and Jean's conflict. Kitty and Utopia would end up winning that war, and Kitty would also play a crucial role in defeating Galactus as well. Also, I gotta say, that whole World War X thing, it was pretty weird. It was pretty weird, friends. Number 10, Warbird. While not a specific member of the core team, Warbird was a member of the Jean Grey School. In fact, she was considered a member of the faculty of sorts. She arrived with Kid Gladiator when he came to attend the school. She also fought on a few separate occasions to protect the school and its students, namely of them Kid Gladiator. Warbird herself is not a mutant but a member of the Shi'ar alien race and was born to be a fierce warrior, which indeed she is. Warbird is as much her codename as it is her rank in the Shi'ar's forces. Warbirds are considered elite warriors in the Shi'ar Empire who are basically bred and trained from birth to be the best of the best. Number 9. Dagger. Dagger was recruited alongside Cloak to join the Dark X-Men, Hammer and Norman Osborn's supplemental mutant team. Although Cloak and Dagger are technically not mutants, but they were considered, I guess, mutant enough. The history of the retcons involving their origin are long and quite inconsistent, and I've talked about it at length before in other videos. At one point they were considered mutants and on and off have been considered as such in the comics, but ultimately it seems they're considered to be simply believed to have been mutants while their powers actually came from exposure to experimental drugs. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show your love for us by heading on over to Facebook, clicking that follow, clicking that like. We're gonna have some exciting new content coming your way over there, so you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8. Cloak. Cloak also joined the Dark X-Men with Dagger, but previous to that, the duo had adventures as well with the Power Pack and the New Mutants back in the day. Being not specifically X-Men team members, but at least, X-Men adjacent. And as I said, their origin has been debated throughout their comic book history. So while we don't mainly consider them mutants, they were mutant enough for Osborn to call on for his X-Men team. Beast has even said before that even the results of the tests that they have done so far on the duo have been considered not enough to be conclusive in his mind. At least not as far as, Hank is concerned. Although it should be noted that the tests have pointed to them thus far not being mutant, at least with where we're at now in terms of their current origins. But of course, like I said, it's gone back and forth for a long time, so could always change again. Who knows? Number 7. Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel ranks a little lower because technically she was referred to as a mutant at one point, but she is also very much a Sentinel, and a person turned into a Sentinel no less. And I guess because of that, she's considered unique enough in regards to her journey and makeup to be considered, I guess, a mutant Sentinel. I don't really understand how that works, but yeah, that was a label that was mentioned in the 2004 Excalibur series in issue number 6, so I mean, it's out there. We gotta acknowledge it. I still am like, though, I feel like if you're a mutant and you're a Sentinel, it feels a little contradictory to me. Karima Sharpander was actually once just a normal human woman, a police officer who actually almost fell in love with a mutant. She ended up being kidnapped and turned into a cyborg Sentinel sleeper agent by Bastion. She activated but would later be deprogrammed and then somehow end up disassembled after that, only to be reassembled by Beast and then asked to join the X-Men, which she did in 2006 in issue 192 of the 1991 X-Men series. Since then though, Omega Sentinel has gone back to being extremely Sentinel in nature, with her acting as a major antagonist in the 2021 Inferno series and pretty much everything leading up to that in very modern comics last few years. Number 6. Cerebro. Yeah, and Cerebro wasn't just a member either. They actually had their own team of X-Men that they were the leader of. Cerebro ended up gaining sentience and set out to catalog all mutants on Earth. That seems nice, but not in this way. They wanted to catalog those mutants by kidnapping them and then keeping them in basically like cryogenic pods. I guess as one does. I mean, I guess what else did we expect Cerebro to do when they became sentient, right? Finding and recording mutants was pretty much all they knew prior to that. Cerebro ended up creating their own X-Men team and leading it, although ultimately the real X-Men did have to come in and put a stop to their crazy schemes. And of course we also found out that Cerebro's X-Men were actually nanotech beings that they had created. But either way you look at this one, whether or not you consider Cerebro's team to be official enough, Cerebro themselves in a way was a member of the X-Men originally, they just didn't have sentience back in the day. But Cerebro has been around since almost day one when it comes to the main team and original roster. Might not be exactly day one, but it's pretty close to day one, I want to say. I can't remember if Cerebro's in issue number 1, but close. Number 5. Cerebra. I know, so many Cerebs on this list, but what do you expect? These are vital members of these teams either way you slice it. Cerebro was a much more loyal member of the X-Men team in the end, in comparison to Cerebro. She was created from the remains of Cerebro and was an AI built by X-Men Forge. Cerebro ended up teaming up with the X-Men on various adventures and even fought alongside them to protect the young mutants of their current school, X-Haven, when it was attacked by demons. See, X-Haven existed within Limbo, but magic had put up defenses to shield it. However, then those ended up failing and hence the demons attacked. Hence Cerebro defending the school. Cerebro made her first appearance in Extraordinary X-Men issue number 1. Number 4. Energizer. Katie Power is a member of the Power Pack, who goes by the superhero name Energizer. The Power Pack are a team of kid superheroes who also all happen to be siblings, the children of James and Margaret Power, who got their powers from a dying alien seeking to protect the Earth, and the children specifically in an altercation, which is also sadly how they died. Katie ended up getting made an honorary X-Men in the pages of the 90s issue of the Uncanny X-Men, volume number 1, issue 195. Here, Katie teams up with the X-Men to save her siblings from the Morlocks, who have taken basically all the kids and manipulated their memories and appearance so they believe they're actually like children of Morlock and Elite. Katie is given a jacket by Kitty Pryde in the issue and made an honorary X-Men as she joins the team to go down into the sewers and rescue her siblings. Also, don't worry, the siblings get rescued. I love the Power Pack. The Power Pack is like just an adorable, just wholesome, fun time. Number 3. Hepzibah. You might be familiar with Hepzibah if you are familiar or perhaps very familiar with the X-Men. Actually, Hepzibah isn't even really Hepzibah's real name, but we can't pronounce Hepzibah's real name, so just call her Hepzibah. She actually has a long history with the team of the X-Men, but also with an important family member of that team, namely Summer's patriarch, the father of Scott, Alex, and Gabriel, space pirate Corsair, or the father of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, if you rather. In fact, Hepzibah met Corsair in prison and helped to orchestrate the escape of those that would found the team known as the Starjammers. Hepzibah would go on to become very close to Corsair, and the two would even become lovers. She would team up with the X-Men multiple times during her comic book adventures, and even later join that team after Corsair's apparent death. Hepzibah is not a mutant though. She's an alien belonging to the race known as the Mephistozoids, who actually were prominent in the parts of space now known as part of the Shi'ar Empire, as they went to war with the Shi'ar and ultimately lost. And also later were like basically labeled as savages by the Shi'ar, and they like created propaganda to be like, they're all animals and they're all evil, which is pretty messed up. War is a messed up thing. Number 2. Lockheed. That's right, Lockheed might be out of this world, but not in the mutant sense. Lockheed is actually an alien who ended up enjoying the company of the X-Men, and specifically mutant and member Kitty Pryde, so much that he decided to leave his home and his people behind and go join the X-Men team. He often goes where Kitty does and is her loyal ally and companion, although he wasn't with her when she was in a bullet flying through space, but we'll talk about that more later. He has also been a double agent, staying with the X-Men while spying on them for Sword as a secret undercover agent, tasked with keeping an eye on the mutants and feeding information to Sword. He actually did this in exchange for Sword's help in regards to problems on his homeworld, so if you're thinking, wow, that's pretty shady, Lockheed, look, he had his reasons, okay? And you know what? Lockheed still really loves the X-Men. I don't think he was trying to do it to be malicious even. Lockheed was actually a fearsome warrior and hero among his own people, and he actually left his fiance to stay with Kitty and the X-Men, so he also gave up a lot just to hang out with them. I love Lockheed. I almost made him number 1. Number 1. Juggernaut. Juggernaut might be known as a villain to the X-Men, but he's also joined the team too. In fact, his story is actually pretty sad. He spent most of his life on the outside looking in a lot of respects. When it came to his family, where his father seemed to even prefer his stepson to Kane, and in regards to the mutant community, which Juggernaut's always kind of like been a part of, but not really, because he's not really a mutant, so he's kind of kept out. Which is maybe why he became a villain? I don't know. Charles was always a part of the mutant world, but even when Kane Marco became Juggernaut, kind of reaching out for his own power, he was shunned in a way by his brother for doing so. Charles Xavier may be seen as the original creator of the superhero team of the X-Men, but in some ways, he was very much a gatekeeper, at least for Juggernaut, even though I know it feels weird to say that about Charles, since He's kind of a guy that's supposed to be like, all mutants come in, but look, he's got issues. Sure, Juggernaut was the one with the vendetta against Charles originally, seeing Charles as abandoning him, but it always felt like rather than resolve that conflict, the two both just decided to battle against one another for like a really long time. Fortunately, as time has worn on, things have changed between them. Juggernaut has changed, he's served both as a villain as well as an ally, and even team member when it comes to the X-Men, and recently in the comics he's taken charge of his own power, going from being an avatar in essence of Sidorak to being an anti-hero who serves only the causes he himself believes in, no longer tied to the will of Sidorak. And he's got that cool new armor too. Still made from Sidorak materials, but he's not like tied to him anymore because it wasn't given to him. Ha! Take that, Sidorak! Juggernaut can be a hero too. Number 10. Deathlok Prime. Deathlok Prime hails from the reality of Earth 10511, where in this future the Roxxon Corporation takes over the world. While not a mutant, he is a member of the X-Force who is also seen as a member of the staff for a short time in the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Deathlok Prime is actually a human cyborg in regards to his origin, but this doesn't stop him from lending his expertise and advice to the students of the Jean Grey School. While there, Deathlok Prime gives a guest lecture and even tells some of the kids what their futures might end up being. Probably based on his own future. He also warns Wolverine about Evan Sabinur, aka Kid Apocalypse, who later takes the code name of Genesis himself. Deathlok Prime says that Evan could either be a hero or a deadly enemy of the mutants. Number 9. Quicksilver. Okay, so a lot of people in the comments for the part 1 of this list really wanted me to include folks like Franklin Richards, aka Powerhouse, Scarlet Witch, and her brother Quicksilver on that list, or on a potential part 2. Here is the problem with that. While Franklin, Wanda, and Pietro were all once considered mutants and yet are no longer, none of them were technically members of the X-Men team, which is why I couldn't really put any of them on that list. Wanda is first and foremost an Avenger and former X-Men villain, but not really an X-Men member. Franklin is always with the Fantastic Four or Future Foundation, and while he spent some time on Krakoa prior to losing his powers and mutant status, still, once again, not an X-Men. Quicksilver is the closest that we've got, which is why I've included him at the impassioned behest of a good number of you. So Quicksilver is here for you. He's speeding on into the list. Quicksilver was never on the X-Men team, but was a member of one of the X-Factor teams. And while many people forget this fact as it's no longer considered, I guess, the most iconic iteration of the team, the X-Factor team, the original one anyways, was created to actually be a team for the original X-Men to be on when they made their return to the spotlight years later, but the name was already basically taken at that point by a newer team featuring sort of the next era of mutant heroes such as Wolverine, Rogue, and Storm. The version of the X-Factor team that Quicksilver was a part of was also a return to that original team's government-funded roots, which the first X-Factor team was government funded. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show your love for this channel in a different way, you can head on over to Facebook where you can give us a follow, give us a like, and do all the Facebooky things. Number 8. Elisande Stewart. Elisande Stewart was one of the founding members of the British Who, or at least one of the most important members of that organization, which also stands for the Weird Happenings Organization, I believe. As a result of her work, Elisande would often run into and team up with the Excalibur team. Later on, she ended up also being considered a member of the unofficial Muir Island X-Men team, as she aimed to help defend Muir Island from the Reavers. Elisande Stewart herself is just a normal human lady, not a mutant. She serves in the British Army where she holds the rank of Brigadier. Or at least, she did hold that rank. She's technically dead now. She was framed by a rival organization and then later killed without much thought by Jamie Braddock while he was using his reality warping powers, as Jamie is wont to do. Number 7. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator, despite not being a mutant, actually attended the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning himself. On part 1 of this list, I talked about his sort of bodyguard turned school staff member Warbird, but I didn't make Q-Bark his own point. So here we go. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Calark, and as such can be extremely powerful due to his physiology and his heritage. However, as a kid, this kind of became a problem. At one point he destroyed half of the Shi'ar royal city Chandalar just because, well, he could. As such, his punishment was to go to Earth and learn how to better control and use his powers at the Jean Grey School, which I feel like he took as a punishment, but maybe Calark was also like, look, you just need to You just need to figure it out, okay? Can't just go destroying cities and such. Number 6. Deadpool. Deadpool definitely wasn't a member of the X-Men because they wanted him there. While Deadpool has a long history with the X-Force team, when it comes to the mainstay team of the X-Men, the mutant staple team at Marvel Comics, Deadpool was actually only permitted to be a kinda like an honorary member. I mean, he was given full membership, so technically he's a member. So that the X-Men could keep a closer eye on Wade, basically. Deadpool desperately was searching for his purpose in life and got it in his head that joining the X-Men was the best way for him to be a hero. He ended up leaving the X-Men team after helping them out with a problem that they believed he'd actually caused, but in reality he was kinda just like framed for. Well, I guess in the end, the X-Men kinda like kicked him off the team, but he also was gonna leave anyway. So there. Number 5. Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Kavita Rao is an important ally and friend to mutant kind, who was once a very misguided and powerful enemy. She attempted to cure the legacy virus when it was running rampant, but failed to do so before Beast Hank McCoy did. Later, she was then approached to create a cure for the mutant gene, with the understanding that it would not be used by force, but would simply be given to those that wanted it, people whose powers were basically super dangerous and had potentially even ruined their lives in some cases. Dr. Rao decided to accept the task. She successfully created a serum which turned mutants into humans. The cure was named Hope. After it was revealed that whole plot was about exterminating mutant kind, Dr. Rao submitted to the will of the X-Men. They destroyed her research, with only Hank keeping the last sample of the Hope serum. In the end, her villainous actions later inspired Dr. Rao to set down a path of redemption after the events of M-Day. She joined a team of scientists brought together by Beast to help bring back mutant kind. Dr. Rao would remain working with and alongside the X-Men throughout their Utopia days, and was later a staff member for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 4. Dupe. Despite Dupe being a glorious weirdo, he's never really been confirmed as a mutant. We don't really know what exactly Dupe is. He is either a mutant or some kind of possibly alien or being from another dimension, but the bottom line is it's never been explicitly verified and set in stone what his origin is. And honestly, this is Dupe we're talking about, so I don't think it ever will be. As a result of all that, he's a candidate for this list, despite being maybe one of the weirdest teammates, mutant or no. Dupe has had many adventures with the X-Men and was even the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, joining up with and aiding Wolverine there. He's also been seen on Krakoa since then. It's clear that Dupe feels most at home among mutants, and that is a place where he gets to be, even if he isn't a mutant. Number 3. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton is the adopted sister of mutant and X-Men member Nightcrawler. She is also one of Kurt's major love interests. Yeah, it's complicated. Amanda was actually an alias that she adopted when she went to investigate what her adopted brother Kurt was up to after the death of their brother Steven was kinda pinned on Kurt. Undercover, Jermaine Zardos, which is her real name, became Amanda Sefton, and it was during this time that Kurt would actually fall in love with her, not recognizing, I don't think, that Amanda was his sister Jermaine at the time. At least, I'm pretty sure he didn't recognize that. I'm not sure if she really even changed her appearance, so it's a whole weird thing. Jermaine, or Amanda as we more commonly know her now, is a powerful sorceress, but is not a mutant, and has been an ally to the X-Men, also belonging to their unofficial Muir Island team. Number 2. Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been a longtime friend to the mutants. Although they initially got off on the wrong foot when they first ran into each other in the comics, they eventually realized that they were both on the side of good and ended up becoming friends and allies. Spider-Man in the 90s animated series even goes to the X-Men for help, hoping they can actually cure him, but only to learn that Professor X isn't so much about like curing anyone as he is about helping mutants find their place and their way. There is also the matter of the fact that Spider-Man isn't really even that kind of mutant. He's considered a mutate, having his genetic makeup altered by that radioactive spider bite, and possibly also by his fate to become Spider-Man as a preordained spider totem in the web of life and destiny, which is also a thing. Spider-Man at one point isn't just a member of the team, he actually has his own team of mutants that he himself is responsible for teaching. How cool is that? Special class. Number 1. Longshot. While some might think of Longshot as a mutant, he doesn't consider himself as such. He is believed to be the clone and possibly both the father and son of Shatterstar. Things get weird in the Mojoverse, and Longshot is basically like kind of a paradoxical time loop in and of himself in terms of him and his heritage, as is Shatterstar in some ways, and kind of as is Spiral as well too. Shatterstar himself is a genetically engineered mutant, and Longshot is a clone of him, but despite that tie to sort of mutantdom or mutant kind, albeit a genetically engineered version of mutant kind, he doesn't consider himself to be a mutant. Longshot was instantly liked by the X-Men when they first found him and ended up joining the team in fighting back against Mojo. Initially, he didn't actually remember who he was or much about himself, and spent a good amount of time on those first adventures with the X-Men team trying to recover his own lost memories. Number 10. The Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character, they are a bunch of them. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race, although we haven't seen them since, really. I'm still of the mind that the Viscora will return, and perhaps that they never really left, but managed to infect either Scott Summers or Jean Grey, or possibly both, and are laying dormant waiting for a moment to strike. Of course, it's been a while now since we've seen them, so this probably isn't what happened. But either way, I would not be surprised if we saw them again. The Viscora were the reason that Sword initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world or possibly universe, wiping out everything within its existence. Should admit, I don't know if they came from another world or another dimension. The portal that they come through kind of implies that they perhaps came from another dimension, but yeah, we haven't seen a lot of them. Number 9. Famine. Famine is another of Apocalypse's children, and originally 4 horsemen. Unlike Death, who I mentioned on our part 2 of this series, Famine was not as deeply involved in the Otherworld tournament, so we haven't got to know them quite as well as some of his more predominantly featured siblings. Famine, instead of being directly involved as a champion of Arakko in the Otherworld tournament featured in the Ten of Swords event, stayed behind instead to act as a representative and witness on behalf of Amenth and Arakko, watching the tournament unfold as a guest of Saturnine. There to witness the tournament and kind of argue about things going on. There was some of that happening. Number 8. Pestilence. Pestilence is the daughter of Apocalypse and another member of the original 4 Horsemen. Pestilence probably has my favorite character design of all of Apocalypse's children, wearing a sun disk headdress atop her head that covers half of her face. Initially, I thought her head was just actually half sun disk, which greatly informed the way I imagined her character's voice in my mind, to be honest. But I'm still gonna keep it like that in my mind. I wish I could put you in there so you could hear her voice, but I can't. And I definitely can't do a very good impression of it right now on the fly. But I'll work on that for the future. Pestilence is another of Apocalypse's children that we kinda know less about, not actively participating in the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords either, and also acting as a representative of Arakko and Amenth. However, both Pestilence and Famine did get involved near the end of the Ten of Swords event, when an all-out war broke out between the mutants of Krakoa and the demons and mutants of Amenth and Arakko. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want that part 4, and you want to go crazy with me and talk about even more mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also let us know in the comments. Also maybe share it. I don't know. Number 7. Ultimaton. Ultimaton actually isn't a new character in the sense of his first appearance, but we did get some new revelations that changes the way that we see his character and definitely makes him feel newly revitalized in terms of lore. Ultimaton's true identity has been unknown for years. Also, I hope I'm saying that right. We're talking over a decade in terms of comic book history of us not knowing who this really is. But in the recent giant-sized Phantom X, which came out in August last year, 2020 if you're watching this into the far future, we learned who Ultimaton really was, as the old villain created by Grant Morrison and Chris Bachalo back in 2003 finally became unmasked. Turns out that Ultimaton is closely related to Phantom X himself, being his identical brother who was also created in the world. One of the many attempts to create a perfect specimen by AIM. But unlike Phantom X, he wanted to stay in the world. He's like, I want to stay here, I'm good. Number 6. Sarah St. John. Although another seeming non-mutant, Sarah St. John could definitely be a huge person of interest moving forward in the new X-Corp comic. Also, this comic was probably my most anticipated new X book in terms of all of the ones we've had announced up till this point. I was just so excited for a business-focused series, plus the return of the X Corporation, plus Angel and Monet both getting to have their time in the spotlight as the main characters of this book. And I gotta say, so far it has not disappointed me, even with all my extra hype about it. X-Corp issue 2 is the Hellfire Gala issue, where the newly relaunched X-Corp team are holding meetings with those interested in investing or otherwise helping the corporation along, making partnerships with them or working for them, you know what I mean? One meeting they don't really manage to get to until it's too late, is with Sarah St. John, a representative of Noblesse Pharmaceuticals. Sarah proves to be charming when they do meet up, and is the only human who reached out to X-Corp to arrange a meeting during the evening of the gala, should be noted. However, it's revealed that she already made a possibly lucrative size deal with the newly formed and antagonistic to X-Corp group, Fenris Consulting, owned by the mutant Von Strucker twins Andrea and Andreas. Number 5. Children of the Vault 4.0. That's right, we're talking 4th generation Children of the Vault. It's getting real, baby! While the Children of the Vault may not be a new group, each time they return to the Vault, they're generally upgraded, and basically a new version of the team is produced. A new generation, if you will. Initially, with all the information the Vault had acquired, it was only able to evolve them to a 3rd generation, which already was really impressive and powerful. However, after acquiring Darwin's genetic material for study, they were able to evolve even past that final stage, giving us the unstoppable 4th generation of the Children of the Vault. We saw this evolution of the team in 2019's X-Men issue 19, and boy are they scary. I cannot wait to see the X-Men face them again in the future. I'm sure that's gonna happen. I love when I see things in just the X-books in general and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a huge problem later down the line. Krakoa has so many enemies, it's crazy. Number 4. Solemn. Solemn is the one that I initially expected Wolverine to fight in the Ten of Swords event. I mean, I think we all did. But he didn't really. Solemn is one of the sword bearers of Arakko who was actually imprisoned when he was recruited. He was imprisoned because he had killed Bracken, War's husband, so War was initially reluctant in recruiting him, even more so when Solemn acted as though he was actually greatly needed and should not only be freed for serving as a champion of Arakko in the Otherworld tournament, but also deserved to receive rewards and gifts for his service. Solemn's powers as a mutant of Arakko grant him super strength and durability. His mutation is that he has adamantium skin. You can see then how he'd make a great match for Logan and why we were all expecting it to happen. Solemn first appeared in 2020's Wolverine in issue 6. He ended up teaming up with Wolverine and went to hell when they both went to retrieve their blades needed to compete. Because they were in hell, because Muramasa blades. As expected, he makes his return in Wolverine, where he ends up stealing Logan's Muramasa blade, which Wolverine used in, of course, the tournament. So now Solemn has 2 Muramasa blades. And everybody else has 0 Muramasa blades. Number 3. Ned. So you might all be thinking that I am crazy for putting Ned so high up on this list, but he's just so great. Honestly, you need to know about him just because of how hilarious and how great Ned is. Ned is a lackey of Ames who ends up being recruited by Phantom X to return to the world in an effort to save Storm. Because, well, Ned has super important AIM knowledge, or something like that. Ned ends up joining them in an attempt to save Storm from a version of the techno-organic virus, as Storm would rather save herself than give up to be killed off and resurrected by the Five. Which also, Storm is such a badass. Ned was also important enough to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala, where even after, I assume, receiving his payout from Phantom X to betray AIM, he was still wearing his AIM suit for some reason. Also, I love his appearance at the Hellfire Gala. If you haven't checked out all those issues, you should go and just look who's in the background, because there's a lot of little treats for all y'all that might have been reading all the X books. Ned makes his first appearance in Giant Size Phantom X, and then of course returns when we see them go actually back to the world in Giant Size Storm. Number 2. War. War is another child of Apocalypse, and the final member that I'll have touched on of the original 4 Horsemen. The final one, if you will. Unlike Famine and Pestilence, War did participate in the Otherworld tournament alongside her brother Death. War lost her match despite her unbridled rage because of the wonderful weirdness that was the Ten of Swords event, being a tournament that was led by the mischievous and unpredictable White Witch Saturnine. War ended up actually having to face off against one of her fellow sword bearers, Solemn. However, Solemn, knowing that War obviously really hates him because Solemn killed War's husband, took this opportunity to call in a favor owed to him by Wolverine, and so Wolverine actually had to step in for Solemn in the match. Solemn then revealed that Wolverine was actually the one to have defeated her son in a battle to the death during that match, which of course made War furious with grief and rage. Her anger, while initially making her appear stronger, actually ended up making her vulnerable to an attack from Wolverine, and he managed to cut off her hand and win the match for Solemn, gaining a point for Arakko, unfortunately, with his victory, even though he won. Bittersweet. Number 1. Summoner. Summoner was actually the character featured on our part 2 thumbnail, so for those who wondered who that was, here's your full answer. Summoner is the grandson of Apocalypse and the son of War and Bracken. However, Summoner is one of the characters who did not survive the Otherworld tournament. Summoner was one of Arako's sword bearers and champions. He faced off with Wolverine in 10 of Swords in the Otherworld tournament and lost against Logan, being killed with the Muramasa blade. Though it should be noted their fight against one another was pretty epic, definitely a great read. You can check out that battle in 2020's Wolverine in issue 7. Summoner was a summoner, hence his name. He was able to summon and control the dark beasts of Arako, elementals, and demons. It should also be noted that Summoner also betrayed Krakoa, pretending to be a friend and then being like, yeah, I'm just here to actually backstab my grandpa Apocalypse and backstab all you mutants because we want to take over Krakoa. Hey.